Hi there, and welcome to this tutorial on creating an Android app inside Xamarin Studio. Now, as you can see, I'm running on a Macintosh computer, but you could just as easily do this on a Windows PC using either Xamarin Studio or you can use Visual Studio. The process is pretty much the same. Right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to load up a new solution, and we're going to go to C# and Android. And in here you have a whole range of templates you can choose from. We're going to choose either the honeycomb or the ice cream sandwich application. Now the difference between these two, if you're not familiar with Android, is that Android Honeycomb is an earlier version of Android, and Google likes to term Android in terms of API numbers. So Honeycomb was the release of Android that corresponded to an API number of level 12. If I go for Android 4 and I say I want an ice cream sandwich application, that's an API level 15 or higher. In other words, what it's doing is it's saying that you must have a phone or a device or a tablet that has at least an API level of 15 to run this application. If you have anything lower, then you won't be able to run it. So we're going to try an ice cream sandwich application, and we're going to give it a name, which we will call Hello World. Click, and click OK. So once Xamarin has loaded up your brand new Android application, you're presented with a few things. The first one, if we look at the left-hand pane here, is our solution pane. So this folder level here is the solution folder, and this folder is the actual Android application folder. And if we click the little triangle next to it, we get a bunch of folders and a file called mainactivity.cs. And as with any application that you make in any software, the computer needs to know where it should start. And for Android, it always looks for a main activity. And main activities it finds by looking through this code, and in particular looking at this bunch of code here, the public class main activity. So every application is going to start from this point where the cursor is. And what Xamarin does is it gives you a sample application that's just a simple click a button and change a value type application. So I'm just going to run through that so you get a feel for it. So the first thing we come across is int count equals 1. And if you know nothing about C#, this simply says that you have to create an integer value. So if you hover over it, it tells you exactly what it is, which is basically a number. And we're going to call it count, and we're going to set it equal to the number 1. Then once we've completed that, we come to this protected override void on create. This runs as soon as your application is loaded and the main screen says that it's ready to do anything you want it to do. So the first thing you want to do at that point is you want to tell the application what to show the user. And in Android, you have these things called resource layouts. And we set them by writing a set content view, and then we refer to where that resource layout is kept. Now if you look over here at the folders, you'll see one called resources. And if you open it and you scroll down, you'll see another folder called layout. And if you open that, we have one called main.axml. And coming back over here to the code, we're setting our content view to resource.layout.main, which corresponds to resource.layout.main. Now it's important to note that when you specify your main here, there is no file ending to it. Android will know which one to use. So if I just show you what Xamarin Studio does by writing this from scratch, we will go set content view, we'll open our brackets, and we'll write resource, which is up here, dot layout, dot, and as soon as you type dot, Xamarin Studio will suggest things that are inside that layout folder. And if you look here, you can see the main right there. If you double click it, it inserts it for you. Close your brackets and put your semicolon in. There we go, and save your project. So let's go see exactly what this main.axml file is. So let's open it up, and we're presented with what our application will actually look like when it's loaded up. And if you look at the top here, we can change a few parameters. So here we can see what this looks like on an Nexus 7 if we like, and we can change it from portrait to tablet mode, rather landscape mode. So let's just change it back to a Nexus 4 and discuss what we actually see on the screen. Well, the first thing is this top tab called Hello World Click, which you can't actually click. You can't change any properties of. And we'll get into why that is much later. The important thing to look at is this button here called Hello World, Click Me. And the way you put a button inside this is you simply go over to your toolbox, you click button, and you drag it across and put it in. And once it's inside there, you can then come over here to the Properties tab and change any properties you like. So I can call this button Xamarin, and it will change it for me. So for now, we're just going to remove that button, and we're going to come back to the button that Xamarin has loaded for us. And if we click that button once, and we go over to our Properties tab, we see various things, like an ID called @+ID/MyButton. Now the actual ID that you will use inside your program is MyButton. You won't use the plus ID at terminology, and I'll get into that later. So each and every element on your screen has a unique ID, because when you're programming, you have to refer back to them. Now the text here says hello world, click me. But if we look over here at the text, it says @string/hello, which isn't the same at all. So if we delete all of this and we type our own text, Xamarin, we'll get the text that comes up. But what's that @ symbol got to do with anything? Well, that simply refers to a string. And these @ strings are stored inside your resources folder. If we go over here to our resources and I click values, I have a strings.xml file. And if I double click that, I have a standard XML file. And if you don't know what that is, then there are plenty of YouTube tutorials on it, because it's a very standard thing. And we go down to resources, and we go down to string name equals hello. So this is simply declaring that I have a string, and I'm going to call it hello, so I know what it's called inside my program. And I'm going to give it a value of hello world, click me. So if we close that, and we come back down here, when it says text @string hello, it's simply saying, instead of writing a string from here, I want you to go find that string over here in this XML file. And that's useful for one main reason. When you need to translate your app, you can do that in one place in your strings file. There's no need to change it in all of the screens in all of your app, which you can imagine would be very, very tedious. Okay, so I'm just going to save that and I'm going to close that view. And we're going to come back here to our main activity. So we've set our content view, which is resource layout main, and inside there's a button that says, I want you to click this, and it says hello world. Now, down here, we have a line of code that says button button. And if you're not familiar with declarations in C#, this is simply saying, make an object called button, and I want it to be from the class called button, which means it just inherits some special properties that only buttons have. But that doesn't mean that the button exists. What you have to do is instantiate it. So you make that button equal to find view by ID button. And all this does is go and look inside your main.axml, and it says, okay, give me all of the buttons. And then you say in here, I want the button that corresponds to a resource id.myButton. So if I just delete that and I do it manually, if I type resource.id. And again, it's found all of the buttons that are inside my main AXML, and it's given me the option to put this button in. So I can just double click it, close my brackets, and put my semicolon in. Okay, now that we've created our button inside the code, we have to tell it what to do every time someone clicks the button. And the way we do that in Android is by assigning a delegate. So if we look down here, we type button.click plus equals delegate. And this is just a fancy way of saying, Android, I want you to listen to the screen touches. And every time someone touches it, if it happens to be this button, I want you to do the following code, which is this, inside these curly braces. So we're going to do something a bit different to what Xamarin is trying to make us do. So we're going to delete that line. So once that line is gone, we're going to type button dot. Now Xamarin gives you a whole bunch of methods and variables and what have you that you could choose from here. But we're going to type our own called set background color, which is here. Now if you just double click this auto completion, it puts it in for you. And because that's a method, so if we just go back, and if you're not familiar with object-oriented programming, we're going to do this again. And if I scroll down here to set background color, you'll notice there's a little M on the left-hand side. That means it's a method. That means generally you have to pass some parameters to do it, and it will do some functionality in the background that you don't need to worry about for now. So when we click it, because it's a method, we're going to open our brackets and we're going to pass a parameter to it. And what most Visual Studio, Xamarin Studio, and what have you do is they have handy hints, like you can see here, where it says in set background color, I'm expecting something that's called an android.graphics.color color. So it's expecting a certain type of variable. So we're going to use that as a clue. We're going to type Android dot. Oh, I've forgotten what it is now. It's not that, is it? Ah, it was graphics. That's it. Dot color dot, and then you get to pick a color. Now you can choose any of these standard colors, or again, if you see this little M here, that means it's a method and you can pass it some parameters. So in this case, RGB, you can pass it 4 parameters. One's an alpha channel, which just means transparency. One's a red, one's a green, one's a blue. Or in our case, we're just going to choose something nice and simple like aquamarine. And then we're going to close our bracket and put a semicolon at the end. There we go. We're going to save that. And now we're going to run it in an emulator. So if we go up here and we come to the play button we go across to debug, that's the one we want, and we check select device. Now we have a problem. It says there are no compatible devices. And if we go to virtual devices, they're all grayed out. And here it says incompatible API level. Now if you remember, we set our API level to API 15, and the only virtual devices that I have set up are API level 10 and API level 12. So of course it won't run. So what we have to do is go and create another Android emulator. So if we click Manage Android Devices, we click Create Emulator, we get this screen that pops up. So these are the emulators that I already have with the incorrect API levels. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to create one. And I'm going to call this Nexus 4 because that's the phone that I have. And I'm going to choose my device, which is Nexus 4. And the target is API level 15. Now there's another problem. It says there are no system images installed for this target. That means inside my Google Android SDK setup, I haven't downloaded API level 15 yet. So if I come back up and I choose API 19, there are still no images, which means I haven't downloaded anything. So what we have to do is cancel that, and close that. And we have to come back into Xamarin, click Tools, and click Open Android SDK Manager. Now this tells me what various APIs I have installed or not installed. And if you just let it load for a minute, because there are a lot of things in there, close Tools, it says I have API 21, which is Android 5, but I don't have API 20. I've only got a part of API 19 because I have the SDK platform, but I don't have the system images that the emulator is actually looking for. So what I have to do is click these little options down here. We don't need sources. And install all of those packages. Accept your licenses and install. And then you have to wait quite a while. Right, so once you've finished downloading the various parts of your Android SDK, you come back to Xamarin Studio, click Tools, Android Devices, and let's create an emulator. So click Create, give it a name, which is Nexus 4, Device, Nexus 4, Target, and now we have API level 19, and this CPU box, we can now put one of these values in, which generally will be ARM. Very few Android devices run on Atoms at the moment. You can give it a skin if you like, but I wouldn't bother. Front camera, back camera, all of these things are just optional extras, really. You can give your SD card a size. So I'll make it 200 megabytes. And it won't let me click OK. And I think that's let's go to the various options. Come up here to your name and see why sometimes some programs don't like it when you have a space in your names. So every time you add a space, it makes it invalid. So we're just going to call this one Nexus 4. And click OK. And what that will do is create a virtual Android device that looks somewhat similar to the Google Nexus 4. We close that and close that. Now, when we come over here to debug and we click this down, Nexus 4 API 19 appears under virtual devices. And we can click it and click play. And that's going to take a little while to build and then load up the Android emulator. So I'm just going to stop the video here and then restart it as soon as it's loaded. Okay, once your emulator is loaded, which for Android takes quite a long time, sometimes about 20 minutes, your app should be pushed to it from Xamarin. And here it goes. So if I just move this slightly to one side, we can see in the background Xamarin has this little box called Application Output that allows you to see exactly what's going on. And if we come back to our app and we go up to our button that we had before and we click it, the background color changes to aquamarine. And if we look back in our code, that's exactly what we told it to do. We said every time you click it, you got to set the background color to this Android graphics color aquamarine. Okay, so let's stop that running and let's do something a little more fancy. Let's say every time we click our button, we want it to change between aquamarine and red. So we're going to use the integer count value up here to do something fancy. So we come down here to our button.click plus equals delegate, and we say, I wanted to change the background to aquamarine, which is fine. But then every time you do that, right after you've completed that, I want you to add 1 to my integer count. Now there are two ways you can do this. You can say count equals count plus 1, and that will add 1 each time. Or there's a handy shortcut where you can say count plus plus, and that simply adds 1 each time. Okay, so now we've added 1 each time. It's still going to set our background color to aquamarine. So we have to have some kind of logic in there that says, I want you to look at that count number, and depending on what it is, I want it to change the background color inside my application button. To do that, we're going to come here and we're going to create what's called an if statement. So we type if bracket count is equals to 1 bracket curly brace, and then we come here, move this in a bit, and close our curly brace. So all this does, it says if this count value is equal to 1, then set the background color to aquamarine. And the reason we have equals here is in C#, that's called a comparison operator. So it simply says, are these two the same? If we had typed just 1 equals, it would try to set the count value to 1 and it would give us an error. So always when you're comparing, you use equals. So what if it's not 1? Well, we want to say else, and else simply says, if the first thing doesn't happen, then I want you to try this other thing. So what we're going to do, if it's not 1, is we're going to set the background color to, I don't know, let's say red. And then we're going to close that else loop using our curly braces. Okay, so, oh, I've just made a little mistake here. There we go. So every time we run that, it's going to check this count value, and if it's 1, it'll change it to aquamarine. If it's anything else, it will change it to red. So let's go ahead and click run. And it fires up our emulator, which you should generally leave running in the background because it takes such a long time to start. And our application will load up any minute now. Ah, there's an error somewhere. So if we come back to here and we click application output, we have absolutely nothing. And if we click in the top bar, there's nothing, which is where our errors normally are. Don't know what happened. Let's just try it again. So I've clicked play. Our emulator has fired up. Our hello world click is there. And it is gone. Right. So you're going to come across this a lot in your programming, where you have random errors like this and you have no idea why. So if you open up your Android app drawer, you can see hello world click is there. And if we click it, let's see if it actually runs. Ah, it does run. So there's a slight problem in Xamarin's communication with the emulator. So let's try out our program logic. When I click the button, it changes to aquamarine. Now if I click it again, the button should change to red. And it does. So our logic works. And that concludes your very first lesson in creating an Android app in Xamarin.